Welcome to Accelerate OC, the only show focused on the people leading innovation in Orange County. Join our host, Kerry Ransom, in his conversations with the trendsetters, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders here, because it's time to Accelerate OC.
Good morning. Welcome to Accelerate OC. I'm Kerry Ransom, and thanks always to our engineer, Paul, for making me and my guests always sound so good. Today's episode is sponsored by OC4 Ventures, which is a new venture studio and fund that I'm a part of here. And we're looking for the most exciting and promising technology entrepreneurs in Orange County, and we'll provide them with all the support they need around capital, coaching, collisions with the great talent here, and connecting them into this rich community. If you are one of those entrepreneurs or you know one, please send them my way, or you can visit us at oc4v.com. I am excited to have a really long-time resident and business leader in our community here, Dan Heinfeld, here today. And before we get to hear from him and his innovative work in the architecture community here in Orange County and nationally, and a lot of the awards that he and his firm have received, let me tell you first a little bit about Dan. He's currently the president of LPA, which is a leading national architecture firm, and he's been there for over 30 years. And he currently leads their design and sustainability initiatives on top of leading the company. And he's currently also employing over 400 people between California and Texas. And he may have other locations as well where people are stationed, but I'll let him share more on that. He's also born and bred and grown as an architect. So he has been doing it. And I always find that as you dig deeper into why people have become architects, I find there's a consistency there in that lasting impact opportunity that they can bring by helping to construct things that tend to last well beyond them. And, California is not nearly as old as other parts of the country, but I think, there are a lot of architectural advances that are coming from California. And so I'll let Dan speak to that as well. He has been a leader in this area of energy efficiency and sustainability, and they have one of the largest portfolios of LEED certified projects in the United States, and not surprisingly have gotten a tremendous number of awards for that work as well. And he was also the recipient of the 2018 President's Award from the American Institute of Architects here in Orange County, and has done a tremendous amount here with local architecture. So I'll certainly ask him about his favorite projects here that he's been a part of. He also clearly leads by example with his innovative spirit. And I tend to focus here on the show, for those of you that have been listening, I talk a lot about software and technology, but it touches everything. And so part of what Dan and I will talk about today is where technology has really infiltrated the architecture world. And I'm sure there are a number of areas where I haven't even fully thought through or can appreciate where it has. And so we'll talk about that today as well. He's definitely an example of what I'll call a triple threat type of leader here in our community, in that he's been innovating in his business. We were just talking off the air about one of the philanthropic organizations that he's a part of here, and I'm sure that's one of many. And he really is, thoughtful about Orange County as a community that can continue to be better and better connected. A number of the other companies that I've had on the show or are the innovators in our community, like Acorns and CloudVirga and Ready for Dawn and others over in University Research Park, are his neighbors. So one of the things I'm going to definitely ask him is how he chose that location there to be part of their office. So Dan, thank you for joining me today and for being part of this Accelerate OC community.
Yeah, really glad to be here, Carrie, and thank you for that very nice introduction. I'd like to have that afterwards for my obit. So.
I'm happy to, we'll send you the clip. So let's get to the starting line. So tell the audience a little bit, I introduced LPA, but tell us about LPA and your history with the company.
Yeah, as you said, I've been very fortunate. I moved to Orange County in 1976, and very shortly after that, I joined LPA. And I'd like to tell everybody that when I graduated from college, I did a lot of research and knew that Orange County was posed for growth and all those sort of things. That would be absolutely not true. I just got lucky, and I ended up here and joined LPA very shortly after that. And one of the things I think is unique about Orange County and what we can talk about a little bit is just kind of the history of design and planning here. And, the Irvine Ranch and Santa Margarita and those places, have large planning projects unlike any other in the country.
That's right. Yeah, really, in the world, right? I think it's influenced, yes.
And really poised not only for architectural growth, but business community growth. And, if you really think about Orange County and how it's really different and why it looks different. I always say this, the crummiest looking street in Irvine would be the best looking street in LA.
That's right.
And that's because of this planning idea that went on in the 60s here. And, that kind of foundation really set this county up to be a really great place to live, work, and play.
That's right.
And so I felt very fortunate to end up here and with my company. So it's been kind of an amazing ride. And I'm really excited about what the next chapters might be in that.
Yeah, I think we'll have some time to talk about some of those ideas here in a bit. I was just laughing to myself thinking one of the first trips I ever made down the 405 when I came to the Orange County LA border and got to Orange County, it just felt different. It felt more comfortable. Yeah,
it's interesting. You say that most people can't really put their fingers on it, but there is something that's different, And I think it really just relates to the idea that it's about open space, 30-foot setbacks on streets, landscaping, all those things that people might not be able to tell you what that is, but they understand there's something different about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I laughingly have called it elbow room when we first moved down here, and I've been here 15 years, and we said, just feels like a little more elbow room here. And I think despite the fact that I'm in, a high density area, relatively speaking, here in Orange County, as far as where we live, it still feels like we've got a little bit of
space, which is, right.
And I think that means a lot. And certainly somebody who understands that and the power of that far better than I do is you in the work that you do. So tell us a little bit about, I talked about, leading the way around areas like energy efficiency and sustainability and in design. What prompted you to really embrace that early on? I think from all that I saw and in talking to folks around your organization, you were doing this before it was cool. Yeah. So what really inspired you to that?
Well, I think there were kind of two fundamental things that were about it. One is that it was just really a good business practice, right? If I can save energy for my clients, they might have money to spend on other things. Our philosophy has always been that it doesn't have to cost more money to do that. You just have to make it part of the building's DNA, And so we actually started on that journey a long, long time ago. In 2004, we made the criteria that every one of our projects would be 25% better than Title 24. Wow. Title 24 is the energy code here in California. And not all states have energy codes. California started theirs in 1976 or 7, so been at it a really long time. And because of that, in our state, we use energy very efficiently, similar to like Sweden in terms of that. So it was just a really good business practice for us. The other thing that we found is that when we were solving problems, we inherently did better architecture. So instead of chasing fashion, we were solving problems, And I always think back, and I talk with our company a lot about this, you can think of some really awful styles of architecture like postmodern. I heard someone the other day where they were sort of saying, we're really not proud of those buildings we did in the 90s, Well, we don't have to say that because we were looking at the world a little differently in terms of that. So inherently, if you are solving those problems and your building knows where the sun is and responding accordingly, you're going to just create a much more interesting project. It's going to be timeless. It's going to have long value. And one of the things you talked about earlier was in reality, any sustainable future really needs to talk about buildings that last for decades and 50 and 100 years, not for 10 and 15. And that's how you create those kinds of buildings, that people will love and use and remodel over and over again. That's where we can really make a difference. And that's sort of been exciting. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were one of only 16 firms to meet the 2030 energy challenge for the entire country.
That's amazing.
The only one in Orange County did it, the largest firm in the country, because we have made the connection between energy efficiency and design excellence. And that's about winning hearts and minds, right? When you do that, it's, 2 or 3% in energy doesn't get a lot of people excited, but a really great building does. So that's how we've been able to integrate that into our business practice and made it sort of really part of the company's DNA.
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I really found it compelling that you moved your office. I believe that you had to move it because everybody that's moved into that former Broadcom space had to move in there. But that you moved your office to this newish or reimagined innovation area over by UC Irvine in the former Broadcom campus. And a number of my other friends, as I was mentioning, have company offices over in that area. What was it that led you to set up shop over there?
Well, there was, number one, it's really we did the buildings originally for Broadcom. So that's one of our criteria. But more importantly, it's exactly what I just talked about. That's a project that's been renovated and sort of given a new purpose. And if you look at the kinds of spaces that were being created over there, it really made, I think, a very connected kind of community of buildings and a campus that's kind of like none other in the county. So it gave my company an opportunity for my people to really have meetings outdoors, in these a variety of spaces. There's a conference center there. There's all of the rich amenities that make my people really work better. Because today we're all competing literally for the same talent pool. And you can offer some things, but people are really interested in the environment that they're living in, because a lot of today is really work is social.
That's right.
And so it was just sort of a natural for us to move there and we kind of knew it was going to be a special place, but we're discovering things every day. And I think your other friends and tenants would tell you the same thing. What's going on there, right?
Yeah, everybody I talk to loves it.
And it gave us an opportunity to sort of rebrand our space that's much more about what we are as a company. We had been in our old space for about 13 years, and you can only sort of do remodels. And so we thought we needed a big change because our work is so different than it was 13 years ago. So everything now is based on collaboration, how I can get people together, talking about things running into each other in the hallways, because we're kind of unique in the architectural world in the fact that we have all of the disciplines in-house. And purposely we did that because we don't feel you can be a really great sustainable architect without having those people talking every day. Now, you mentioned one of the things about innovation earlier, and they said that Thomas Jefferson wouldn't know much about our world, but he could come back and detail a brick building. That's probably not true anymore because of the advent of technology into architecture, things like Revit, where we actually can build the building first before it gets built. I mean, so having those engineers all working together on that same model just inherently better, and these collisions of ideas that can happen with people when they're all in the same room. Really exciting sort of things that are going on. The other part of it is the research now that's happening with architecture that's available with softwares and things. You can do so much more from an evidence-based design standpoint. So, intuitively we would have said a 3-foot overhang would shade the window, right? Well, now we can absolutely tell that, and it might be 2'8", so it saves material. So there's so many things like that are going on right now that makes the design world really exciting and very, very different than it was even 10 years ago.
How do you get a client to appreciate that level of detail? Because that's incredibly valuable as a provider to an entrepreneur or a company who's going to make a big investment, where you can either optimize the cost or even the experience. Because I feel like, to your point, so much of this is about experience, whether it's customer experience or employee experience, today that is where technology is having such an effect on the digital side, and I'm sure.
Right. Well, user experience is like key, right? And so we try to make it really easy on our clients. All of these things don't have to happen because you need more money. My job is to understand the budget and find out a way to best apply that budget to as the best advantage of that client. So we always say, look, to save money on energy isn't going to cost you anymore, right? To create a healthy indoor environment's not going to cost you anymore. To create a great user experience isn't going to cost you more. It's just going to be about how we do our value systems and how we make choices. So what's the issue, right? What's the downside to that, right? Yeah. So that's where we tend to go. And quite frankly, that's just our DNA. That's our job. Because, one of the great things about being architecture, it's like literally one of the last custom things we do in this country. You could pick up the same set of plans and put it on another site. It'd be different, So that whole idea about that you're really crafting something is inspiring. And that's where I think you can really make a difference in people's lives and change lives.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and there's something really noble. I think, as I said, I think every architect that I've met has that sense of lasting impact, and the ability to impact people's lives is at the core of what drives them to be one.
Luckily, we have a very diverse practice. We work with K-12, higher ed, corporate. But when you see any user use their building and it starts to change their lives, I mean, that's kind of the thing that makes you want to get up in the morning and do it again, because there's really nothing like it.
Yeah, that's. So as you think about the training and you sort of alluded to engineers in your team, have you seen over your time a huge shift in the type of skills and the type of people that you have in your organization?
Yeah, the technology level of, there's a lot of people who are very critical of the millennials, and but I'll tell you, these people are so talented and what they come out of school knowing, and their ability with software programs and things. If you guide them the right way and give them some great opportunities, they can really make your company that much better. And so that skill level of the sort of intern coming right out of school has dramatically changed, and for the better. Yeah.
Have you seen the kind of impacts in your business from a profit and loss, margin standpoint because of technology?
Yeah, I think we can do more in the same amount of time, and so therefore we're doing better projects. And for us, that's where the sweet spot is. I'm trying to, the revenue per person has increased, but we're also having to do things much faster now than we used to 10, 15 years ago, because time is money.
Sure.
And so when people come to us, there's a definite schedule, and we've got to get in on time, or I'm paying penalties here or whatever. So it's given us the ability to do a lot more in less time. That makes it a little more hectic, but without those tools and those sort of creative people working that way, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
Yeah, I think it's a really compelling comment you made about it's one of the last things that is true craft in a world where in some cases we look at the landscape across the country and think, okay, every place looks the same with big box this and that.
Right.
And if you look at the most valuable companies in our economy now from a market value standpoint, they tend to be software or technology companies. So are you seeing the future for your industry and saying the ones that sort of have and embrace technology the most are the likely winners in this?
Yeah, I think absolutely that is the path. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. And the more you embrace it, the better you'll be. And that's just part of where our society is today. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's been something that I've really contemplated around a lot of the companies that are, I'll call it legacy companies in Orange County, is there is this, either the market's going to force you to reinvent yourself or they're going to render you obsolete. And, it's been an amazing several decades for Orange County. You mentioned, at the outset when you got here, being lucky that you didn't necessarily know that the growth was just going to naturally happen. But there's just been amazing growth in the last 40, 50 years in this area. And, I grew up, I don't think I share this. I grew up in a long-standing family business that my dad sold last summer. It was 146 years old. And we were in the same community for that entire time. And I remember telling him, just because we've been here for 100 years doesn't guarantee us 10 more. And as I think about Orange County, I think people that have been here a while have seen an amazing transformation. As you think about the planning and the architecture, do you think we're set up for the next several decades here?
Yeah, I think we could be. I'm very bullish on Orange County as a place. We've got a lot of things going for us. We also have some sort of headwinds, as well as all of us in the business community know, as it relates to it. And so, but there is an entrepreneurial spirit here.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
always been here. And I think people have a way of sort of solving those. Because one thing I think that's interesting about Orange County is people want to be successful here.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
And so they're driven to be successful. They'll find a way to make those changes. Because as you said, that it'll either happen or the marketplace will tell you,
right. That's right.
I don't need you anymore. I'm lucky. I get that feedback every interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we kind of, boots on the grounds for us, basically, essentially, because unlike a lot of businesses where I could go out and create a new widget or a new software program, I have to have a client who has a project who wants to hire me.
That's right. That's
so
right.
I have to show value.
That's right.
I got to show it every day.
And you got to be relevant every day, right?
Exactly.
So it's a great point that I mean, the introspection there is, I think, not common, that you're thinking about that all the time. You feel it, but
and so I've got to be exactly those things you said. I've got to be that for that particular client so that they can hire me and that I can do a great job for them.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and I think that's a great lesson for the folks here who either have been here or are presently successful. How do you create that accountability with somebody? If you're feeling like you're on the top of the world, that's about when you are
that's
likely to
always
get
the
knocked
worst place
off.
to be.
That's right.
That's
That's right. Yeah. So I think that's super, super helpful. So let's go under the hood a little bit. You mentioned that you have worked across a number of different segments, education, government, and that everyone can be positively impacted by a well-designed environment and building. Is there an area that you think in the mix of a community that has a bigger impact, as you think about business structures versus government versus schools? Are there ones that you think have larger impact than others?
Well, obviously, I think education is sort of has always been the great hope of this society. Really, if you think back, a good public education was the gift of America, could change lives, could change the trajectory of families, generations. So we find that doing that kind of work is absolutely amazing, and that it's really positive and really important work. That we're doing classrooms where kids can succeed. That there's a whole generation now, a whole different idea about thinking about education. It isn't one size fits all. It's fine, and so that puts a lot of pressure on the kinds of buildings that are created for that to happen. So that's super inspiring for us, but I wouldn't say it's any lesser than doing a really great corporate campus for a group of people that will change how they might work together or the products that they do. I mean, you asked me about my favorite buildings. It's always the last one we did. So it's a very
recency effect.
Yeah, exactly. They're equally important, but I think the ones that we feel really, really good about are ones where we're going in places like the Samueli Academy. They just had 100% graduation rate. That's the kind of success stories that we want to emulate as a group and as a society over and over and over.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and yeah, the way that the different spaces work together, I'm sure, is also a factor, and that has to be hard at times when you do one part of a community but not the rest of it?
Well, you always lead by example, right?
That's right.
So we feel that by, sort of whether it's just one excursion or several, it's going to change the trajectory. So
how do you think about, we talked about energy. Are there other factors as you think about buildings, materials, and, California, as you said, has had an energy policy for a long time. We've sort of led the world in many respects. How do you think about the future of design and building from other factors that we may not think about day to day?
Well, energy is just one part of sustainability. So stormwater management, what do we do with rain and how do we keep it out of the ocean? How do we create habitable landscapes that don't have to be irrigated? So when you really think about sustainability, it is a cluster, and it's really a synergy of an entire building complex and organization that needs to be really thought about. So I'm interested in doing buildings that find ways to harvest water. I'm interested in ways to find buildings that are net zero. Carbon neutral. All of these sort of things are starting to come into play, and I think you can kind of see that end of the road, that buildings where we have a really big stock of net zero buildings. I think you also see that in the automotive industry, that we're going to sort of a carbon emission free automotive. The one place that the industry's starting to look at right now is embodied energy. The area, what it takes to create the products to build a building. We haven't really looked at that in a lot of depth, but now we're really starting to look at it. And so that's another really important aspect of it. And that'll just inherently start to change the industry and the building products we use and things like that in another positive way. So the more sort of things you make influence your design process, the better the design is. So I always talk about this, that you really find people's creativity when you kind of put them in a box, so you can see where they can kind of push that envelope. So the more those kinds of things start to come in and affect our process, the better design buildings will do.
That's exciting to think about. One of the things I've posited to some folks here is I think about Orange County as an ongoing innovation. I mean, you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit, which I totally agree with, and we have some clusters we have a tremendous amount of real estate and design and planning and architecture depth here in our community. As you think about the future of innovation, how much do you think Orange County could through better collisions, and maybe it's even the work you're doing over by UC Irvine, start to think more holistically about what I'll call innovation in real estate technology or property technology, or how we infiltrate even more in a building's DNA and operating system and leading some of that innovation here? Do you think that we have all the pieces to do that here in Orange County?
Yeah, I really think we do, because we have a very sophisticated real estate industry here.
That's right.
So they could really start to help weigh in. I mean, a lot of times just some really simple things like just fine-tuning your HVAC system, making sure it's operating properly, can yield you big benefits. And so I think that whole way that buildings are managed, and a building might be occupied at 25% because the rest of the people are out. Does that part of the building shut down? Can we start to look at things like that? So I think there's a lot of things that Orange County could do with their real estate industry in terms of that, and how we start to integrate that with building design and operating properties could be really kind of exciting. And again, there's a lot of smart people here, a lot of technology, a lot of innovation. And I think in some ways Orange County will have to start to do that, because we're going to have to find ways to create more jobs.
That's
here,
right. Well, and it seems like those mashups, right? I mean, it's people in your world thinking about design and the front end of a project and how that will impact on down the line, with people who are maybe thinking more retrofit after the fact, sort of like with the auto industry having aftermarket, that maybe they're people going in and putting in sensors or other systems, maybe those start to get more designed in, and so your company maybe becomes even more of a technology company than it already is. Yeah.
And I think it's along the same lines. There's way more existing building stock.
That's right.
And that's where some amazing opportunities could really, and sustainability needs scale. And that's one place where it could be really huge in terms of that, that we could really start to look at some of these old buildings and really start to do things with them where they're not great from an energy standpoint, not great from water use. And you could really make some big headroads in terms of sustainability with those.
Well, and I think that, on the short term probably has temporary job opportunities as you do retrofit, but if you create the right environments, there are a couple malls around here that I drive by pretty regularly on the highway, and I look over and go, there's just no way in 2019 that can be the highest and best use of that property.
That property, yeah.
And it can't be very energy efficient knowing it was built 50 plus years ago.
So, great opportunities for reuse and renovations of those, and there's a lot of them throughout the country.
That's right. And that's right. And maybe to lead the way from here, and maybe those become the new community centers that people can meet and engage in new ways.
That's a really good point. The more and more you hear and the more and more studies, we as a society like to connect.
Yes.
And we're looking for those places to connect.
That's right.
And that can be a really exciting sort of relook at those properties.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So I'm curious, you've worked, I'm sure, with a number of entrepreneurs in doing design. And how do you think about architecture as a way to help them tell their story or share their vision?
Well, it's exactly what we should be doing, is listening to what is their culture, what is their vision, and doing a building that reflects that, because that's authentic, right?
That's right.
And that comes across in a space, or in an organization, in a culture. And when we can sort of make sure that we're listening and hearing that, and not necessarily giving them what they're asking for, but what they need in terms of that to help that, culture and that, because the idea of a company having a history and being able to tell that story over and over to new people, and that's a really important aspect of any kind of placemaking. So that's where we think we can help any entrepreneur, any building or organization, and truly understanding how they work, how they could work better, what's their story, what's their culture about, and creating a space that really is a part of that is where we think we have a really important role to play.
Yeah, and I applaud you for that perspective. I think the other thing, I've had the benefit of getting several of your recent publications, and I feel like you as a firm are showing your own culture and telling some great stories through that. And so appreciate you for doing your part to
thanks.
To really inspire and help tell those stories. And that sort of gets to my question about what do you think you've been here in Orange County for a while, what do you think we can do better as a community to share those stories? To
share those stories? Well, number one, start sharing them, right? I don't think we do a very good job of telling kind of the things that are going on here. The idea of a community, it's difficult here in Southern California because we all have so many things we can do, right?
Yeah.
Our
choices.
Our choices are amazing. Maybe that's one of the stories we need to tell.
That's
right. But I think if you're doing something really meaningful, you can find people to be a part of that and share in that with you. And I think maybe we just need to reach out to each other a little more to do that.
Yeah, and sort of challenge each other to elevate our thinking a little bit, to seek it, that we have a greater opportunity to influence and impact the lives of a lot of people. I mean, a great well-designed building can do that.
Right.
A great high-impact, purpose-driven company. I mean, it gave me great hope earlier this year when some senior most leaders of companies on a global scale came out and said, hey, we need to actually think about more than just our shareholders. We need to think about the other constituents that we have. And as you think about our community, we've had an incredibly prosperous county, but not everybody prospers here. So how do we try to create more inclusion, which I think spaces often have an opportunity to do that.
And I think there's much more awareness of that.
Yes.
And I think that awareness is being driven not only by people with the right kind of spirit, but I think it's also being driven by the fact that business leaders understand they have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
This county's not really going to have much of a future if we don't find ways to be more inclusive, find ways to, create housing that people can afford, and things like that. So I think there's a much more interest in that, and it's one of necessity and also the right kind of mindedness set.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've said on this show a couple times in recent weeks that I feel like Orange County almost has this opportunity to be a laboratory for the world. We have such diversity of economy and socioeconomic capability and means and even just views as far as how people think about the world, that if we can find the right places to have civil discourse and discussion, I feel like we can come up with really compelling solutions for here that also could get extended elsewhere. And I see some of those initiatives underway. I mean, the work being done in mental health and other areas here that are first in the world.
Yeah.
So
what the county's doing with the mental
right.
health program is amazing. Through their Live Well, I think, I think it's the first in the country that's going to be doing that way. So I think that is very much a part of the Orange County entrepreneur spirit. And maybe now some people are actually starting to focus that entrepreneurial spirit in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, which is exciting. And I think the can do and let's pull people together and, appreciate folks like you coming out and being willing to share your experience and your capability and sort of a willingness to get involved in the areas that you are and continue to influence. And I appreciate you for you and your firm and the great design and great work that you've created here to make life so enjoyable. And it's always amazing to me when people come here and go, this is an amazing place. It makes me appreciate it that much more for the privilege of being able to live here.
I always have fun showing people from other parts of the country around. So, because we have a lot to show.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Well, Dan, one last thing. Unfortunately, I could have continued this for another hour, I'm sure, but Paul gave me the time. And I always like to have my guests share either word of wisdom or piece of advice. And so as you think about other business leaders here in Orange County, and you certainly know a number of them, but the people that are aspiring to become the future business leaders, a lot of the folks that listen to Accelerate OC are what I would characterize as the high aspiration, high ambition future leaders. What advice or key lesson would you love to share with them?
I'd probably tell them to believe in this place. There is so much really good infrastructure here to build on. And we talked about it earlier. There's lots of things that are, can make you discouraged about it. But there is a sense of place here, an infrastructure to build on that, if we got some of the things we've talked about today right, it could be really a special place.
Oh, it is a special place.
Right now.
For sure.
So,
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think those of us like you and I are compelled to say, let's make it. It's always going to be a good place. Let's make it great and continue to keep it great. So, Dan, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your words of wisdom and frankly, for your words of hope. I think that's a great reminder that it's easy to get maybe frustrated or discouraged at times, but we have so much to be grateful for here in Orange County. And thank you for sharing that. Welcome to the Accelerate OC family.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You've just listened to Accelerate OC. Join our live recordings every Tuesday morning at accelerateoc.com or listen, like, and share anytime from your favorite podcast spot. Let's accelerate OC together.